I'd like to call the regular meeting of the David Douglas School Board to order. We've made some changes in how we're handling our meetings starting tonight. And so we're going to start our meeting off with a Native American language acknowledgement, land acknowledgement, sorry. Today, I would like to acknowledge the people whose land we are gathered on. Present-day Portland is located in the traditional villages sites of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Malala, and many other tribes who have made their homes along the Columbia and the Willamette rivers. Oh, I'm doing this with... Okay. Let us also acknowledge the robust Native community made up of tribal diversity that originates from around the country and whose journeys have brought them to Portland by ways of forced displacement or seeking opportunities. Today, these same communities celebrate their heritage, showing resilience and tenacity that would be greatly admired by their ancestors. Okay, I want to welcome everyone tonight, and our first order of business is swearing in our newly elected board members. And from what I understand, we all have to be sworn in. Yes. So Sahar and Aaron. Over here with Pat.
So, position one first.
when I did it the first time, and then I did it the last time.
Right.
Oh, I know. Okay, this is our July meeting, and beginning of each fiscal year, we usually have a change in our leadership. So we're going to start out with the election of our new board leadership for 2019-20. Do I have any nominations for chairman?
I would be so honored to move the nomination of the potentially first Latinx board chair of the David Douglas School Board ever, Andrea Valderrama. Can I get a second?
Do we need a second? Yeah.
I second that.
Okay. Is there any other nominations? Is it moved to close the nominations?
I move to close the nominations.
Okay. All those in favor of Andrea Valderrama for chair for 2019-20, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Abstain.
You don't abstain, but I am handing that over to you.
Okay, so the next election that we have is election of vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair?
I would like to nominate Stephanie Stevens.
Okay. Any other nominations? We'll go ahead and close nominations. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay, now we got to do a little switcheroo here. Give us a minute.
Madam Chair, can I just interrupt for 30 seconds, please?
Sure.
So part of the tradition of recognizing our new leadership and celebrating and transitioning is to recognize and thank our outgoing board chair. So I'd like to take this opportunity to present Frida Christopher for outstanding leadership as school board chair for 2018-19. Thank you so much for your service and your continued leadership. Really appreciate it.
I have to joke and say I'm running out of room on the wall. So, but let's move.
Well, I'll say really quickly also, I've really appreciated your leadership not only this past year, but over the years I've seen you on the board even before my time here. And thank you so much for all of that work. Yeah.
You'll get your new one, the chair, next time.
Okay, thanks for hanging in there, folks. So the next item that we have is attendee input. No one signed up. Okay, so moving right along, we have the approval of our consent agenda.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay. It passes. Next item is ratification of our collective bargaining agreement. This is actually a reopener between the David Douglas School District and OSEA Chapter 40 from July 1st, 2019 to June 30th of 2021. All right.
Ken, do you want to start, or I was going to introduce our bargaining and our ratification? Okay, we're kind of an unusual board that we always have board members who serve within the bargaining units, representing the district. And as Kyle likes to say, this was the shortest one we've ever done. But I think one of the reasons it's short is because we have such good relationships with our two bargaining groups, and it makes it easy to come to agreement on many things because we're all looking out what's best for the district, what's best for the kids, and what's best for staff. So I guess I would like to make a motion. Oh, did you want to make comments before I make the motion? Then, okay. Okay, I'd like to make the motion for ratification of collective bargaining agreement between the David Douglas School District and OSEA Chapter 40, July 1, 2019 through June 30, 2021.
Okay,
I second.
seconded, discussion?
Yeah, so just real quick, Madam Chair, in the discussion, we do have an individual from the bargaining team here this evening, and I want you to know that there were others that were unable to be here. We are in our summer months, we're in July, so with that said, there's just a whole bunch of people I'd like to thank, and I'm not going to attempt to try to thank everyone, other than to recognize the amazing work our classified staff do. The reality of the care they give our students, from instruction to feeding to safety to transporting. We could not run our district without our classified staff. We truly value them and know that they're an essential part of our mission and what we do. So I just take this opportunity to thank them, and then also thank them for the interaction, for the relationship, for coming to the table. You know, we talk often, we can be on other sides of the table and doing this, but really we're here for the same reason. We're here for the kids. And I feel so fortunate to work in a district where we have labor leadership and labor in general that believes that truly believes in our kids and our district. So just want to say thank you. And before you board, the administrative team has a recommendation and ask for approval of the Chapter 40 reopener. And well, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? All right. Superintendent's report. Oh. Sorry, signatures. Okay, now the superintendent's report, is that correct? Yes. Okay.
So just a couple quick items, and then one a little more that we'll spend some time on. But the first two happen to be community events, and because we are streaming and televised, I thought I'd take the opportunity to share, and I'll hand it and I'll pass it around the board. You guys can look at the dates, write them down, and I'll follow up, scan them, and get them in an email to you. But just want to invite, we've received invitations. So the first one's from Early Learning Multnomah to the Parent Accountability Council invites us to our 5th annual celebration, and it's going to be July 19th, 10 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. at Gateway Discovery Park, right down the street from DO. So a neat opportunity. And then the next one, Fun in the Park. Everyone is welcome, free event. There's going to be face painting, henna, bouncy houses, performances, free food, and much more. And that's on July 27th from 10 to 1. And the location is Ron Russell Middle School in front of the cafeteria outside. So it's kind of behind the school, the gym, or the track area. And EB, Earl Boyle's parent group is putting that on. So again, I'll start with Sahar here. We'll pass it around if you're interested, but we'll scan it and share it as well. Kind of some light announcements. The second one, just a quick announcement. There'll be so much more to come, but I wanted to keep it on your radar because our legislature did just close and basically went out. One of the reminders is our funding and what came through with funding on House Bill 5016, the $9 billion state school fund. Just a reminder that included in that is our student investment account, and there's a lot of different requirements around that money, which is good, but we will be coming to the board to have discussions. We have to get public input, which we should, which is good, but we'll be going through a process to basically, with that extra money, that new money, how do we spend it? And there's a piece that specifically the school investment account, they're expecting 2020 to 21, that to be about 472 million. So we'll get a piece of that as new money, funding to make investments in our school. Those investments have to be within expanded learning time, student health and safety, class size reductions, well-rounded learning experiences. So a lot more to come, and it probably will be referred to the voters. I know many of you know a lot about this, maybe more than I do about it, but right now I just wanted to keep you in the loop that we are tracking it. We're trying to at least stay one step ahead of it, and more to come. But the reality is as you see that, as you see the possibility of a possible special election, that's what it's about. So pass those around. One more thing before we get into a little bit more of a discussion, and this one's kind of off the cuff, but I thought the board would be interested, and I don't want to put him on the spot, but Derek might weigh in as well. Just a reminder that we had a request from our high school to get the stadium where it will fit with Wi-Fi. Basically, that Wi-Fi will access. Right now, it's not accessible for Wi-Fi. And our stadium is a teaching station. Many of you might drive by every day and see kids out there. So to use Wi-Fi, everything from safety all the way to teaching is a great opportunity. Well, we heard that the cost is fairly significant. With that said, Derek, his team, business went through, and we did, through E-rate, get funded for that Wi-Fi project, we'll call it. So ultimately, you might see some construction out there. You might see some ditches dug all around the track. We don't have to dig up the track or the turf, but there is going to be some work out there, and basically we're adding Wi-Fi, so when we get back to school next year, our teachers will be able to access Wi-Fi and our community from the track. Anything to add, Derek?
Yes. So not only is it going to be the stadium, but it's going to be the fields as well. So basically from the north gym all the way basically to the end of the football field. And so we will be getting an 85% reimbursement from E-rate for that. So we're excited. Hopefully it's going to start next week. We're still kind of nailing down the start times and so forth, but that will, should be started next week. So.
And my last piece in my report, you do have a memo in front of you, or a issue summary in front of you. If you want to find it, it's in the packet when you showed up. It was also emailed. It's from myself and Pat. And we just wanted to take a minute. Later this evening, Andrea is going to be talking about board assignments and board work, and specifically some of that work is related to strategic planning, moving forward with that process, and the possibility of moving forward with a bond. With that said, we just wanted to kind of keep it on the radar and have conversations with the board to communicate what we're doing as a leadership team to continue to explore this option and make sure we're providing information for you along the way. Tonight, there's no quote-unquote action. We'll just be forming, my understanding, as committees tonight, actually just getting things started. But by next month and the month after at the latest, we're going to be moving forward pretty fast and furious with this, making some decision is our hope. So the very first thing, if you notice the top, has to do with strategic planning. And the reality, there's two options there for the board to consider. Again, we don't have to make a decision tonight. It's just information. So when we bring it back to you, it won't be the first time you saw it. But ultimately, there is a cooperative agreement through the state of Oregon that lists several vendors that we could use around strategic planning, and or we could go out for an RFP process, which is typically about 4 to 5 weeks. At this point, just kind of planting that seed for you to consider and think about. We did budget funds in our budget for strategic planning to bring on a consultant to help us through that process. With that said, Pat, anything before I go on to bond, anything you'd like to add to that? Any questions about strategic planning possibilities at this point? Again, it's just information, so I don't expect a lot. There'll be a lot more to come, but wanted to make sure you're aware that we have heard that this is the board intent and direction, and we just want to be supportive in that process. So, without questions, the next part is bond planning and kind of where we were. We've done some planning all the way back to October 25th. Staff identified areas to begin working towards and preparing for our next bond, And you can see there's a few things that we've done and already started by checking off the list. Very first is contacting PSU to update enrollment and do the study. I've already done that. The next is preparing RFPs for polling, surveying services to public relations services. Ultimately, we're in the process of actually developing that as well. One ask we have there is, as we go through this process, is thinking about the timeline. Are we thinking about spring or fall, right? Or are we thinking a year out, 2 years, 1 out? But there are implications with those decisions, which is kind of outlined a little later in this draft. The next thing that we've talked about and thought about is referring our current deferred maintenance, looking at our list of needs for buildings. And Mr. Callaway, our operations director, along with BBL Architects, have been working on that and prioritizing. Reviewing any programmatic needs, and that has to do with, are we adding more early preschool centers? Are we adding a wing on for alternative programs? Are we building with property we own? That list can keep going and going and going, right? But that's kind of something we'll have to be talking about. And then finally, to continue to get updates from Piper Jaffray around projections for levy rates and scenarios. We've had Piper Jaffray Carroll come to our board, I believe, at least twice since our bond workshop, but she'll show up at any time we want her, she will be here. With that said, kind of the timeline and direction, there's one reminder below, and I will read this out. As a reminder, if the district applies for OSCIM, Oregon School Capital Improvement Match, reminder, there is a matching program, it must have a current facility plan and facilities assessment completed. Good news, we have that. Our current facility plan will expire after 2020. The application due dates for the grant in September 1, 2019 for May 2020 election and July 1, 2020 for November 2020 election. The district could receive up to $8 million as a match for capital projects through the grant opportunity. So just a reminder that that's there. I think that's significant for us to be considering, thinking about, and talking about as we go through this process and making and helping us with our decision. So with that said, the last piece shows some of the bonds that we'll be following off. And Pat, anything to add there? Anything you'd like to add? No. Yes, please.
I think when we're looking at the bonds falling off, also to look at keep track of the 2 URAs, Lentz and Gateways, because they expire in 2.5 years. And if they do expire, we need the dates on when that tax base will fall back into our district. And it'll have a huge impact,
So again, at this time, it's just for the board to know that we're continuing with the process, continuing to move forward and stand ready to serve, answer questions, and ultimately I know our board chair and board vice chair are going to be moving this conversation forward, both tonight and in months to come. But at this point, this is some of the background work. That's my report this evening.
All right, thank you very much. So the next item we have is the financial report and investment report.
Good evening. So at your stations is the financial update. I did want to let you know that the investment update wasn't quite ready with the holiday and the changeover in our office on switching some payroll processing. We're a little behind, so that will come to you next month. To let you know that the adopted budget is on the website. If you want a hard copy, please contact Lori and she'll facilitate getting you an actual hard copy. There were a couple questions asked that I wanted to go back and make sure everybody got answers on. One was, how much does the district spend on police services? These questions were asked during the budget committee. The district spent on dances and proms just about $1,600, $1,700 graduation, $13,000 for athletic events, and about $3,000 for board meetings. The other question was, what were the professional services budgeted in the school board's budget? So there's about $285,000 in the school board budget for professional services, and you can see the list there that it provides anything from legal services and audit to negotiation, election, some consultants, OSBA. Okay. The financial update, you'll see that we're still projecting just over 16 million. I would not be surprised if that came in higher. We currently have 15.9, but you'll also see that there's about 1.6 million in encumbrances that we're currently clearing. And as we clear things, we usually find that we haven't spent as much money as we had planned. Derek's very happy. He's over here doing a happy dance because the previous report, I told you we hadn't heard about the E-rate money from the city that flows through the ESD. And lo and behold, we got a check. So Derek's very happy, and so you'll see that ending balance up. Capital Projects Fund, right now it's about $282,000 projected to finish out that project at Ventura Park. That may flux here because I'm not exactly sure how much the contractor got done. So whatever we don't spend obviously continues on, but that project will more than eat the rest of the bond funds. And then we do have some general fund that supplemented that, if you recall. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask or email me.
In our capital projects, that balance, does that include the bond funds being spent down?
Correct.
Okay,
So that's what I anticipate June 30, but the project's still being done.
right,
And so we'll be spending all of those funds.
okay.
Finally.
Any other?
It's better than being short
Yeah.
over budget.
Okay. Moving on, if there are no other questions, to superintendent's evaluation. I think Frida is going. No, it's okay. It's okay. I totally fine. I think are you leading the superintendent's evaluation item? Okay. Just checking. Okay.
I'm used to leaving it on. It's required by law that we have to evaluate the superintendent each year. And so, as a school board, we met in exec session and did that evaluation. In summary, I have to say, we all agree that Ken has met our expectations. We have 3 goal areas with sub-goals. And what I haven't heard in some time is that one of the strongest areas that the board felt was his financial, organizational efficiency and effectiveness. So that often is usually a superintendent's weak point, but everybody felt that's one of his strengths, and they're very pleased with the work Ken has done over the last year. And of course, we already told him to roll over his contract. So, but I'm going to open it up for other board members' comments.
Any other comments or input? I'll just share that, you know, in the conversations that we had and with you, you know, just to reiterate what Frida said, one of the things that I've really appreciated is the commitment that you've had to really incorporate our input around family engagement and really think outside of the box, knowing that our district has been rapidly changing and that there are needs in terms of accessibility and engagement that need to be part of the conversation to make sure that our decision making is equitable, and I've really appreciated that. In addition, all of the other work and the other piece of this has been your consistent communication. I feel like has been helpful to me as someone who has a pretty hectic job, like all of us I know around the table do, and so that has been extremely helpful to get the updates when necessary on what's going on in the district. So thank you.
I'd like to thank you for your work around supporting the equity committee, the racial equity committee this year, and particularly in those meetings, you know, being willing to let the community lead, right? To really be respectful of the space, the educators of color, the folks of color in the room, and to add in ways that were helpful to that process. So thank you. Yeah.
Okay. So moving on, we have the next item, policy revision. This is an action item, policy BDDG, board meeting minutes. And I'll let Ken kind of clarify here, but my understanding is there was kind of a slight legal issue that came up with some of the language that we had used. So we're updating the language. Yeah, thank you. We're just kind of striking that one sentence. Again, this is policy BDDG that we had talked about in the previous meeting. Is there anything else you wanted to add? I think it's pretty straightforward. I'll give you all a chance to look it over.
Yeah, so long story short, we went through this policy. It looks very familiar because we just adopted it. We did send it to OSBA for approval and to go through the process. Unfortunately, after we approved the policy, we did get some feedback about this line. And specifically, we struck it because of the feedback we got from OSBA around our minutes and how inclusive they should be or not be and what we should be doing. So we made a change, but then the board, they came back and said, no, it needs to be there, and this is the reason why. So it really comes down to how you read it, right? The idea, it doesn't say you include every words in minutes, but what it's meant to say is you need to capture every discussion. The board cannot sit up here and have a conversation about the pool and not have it reflected somewhere in the minutes, right? But what it does, the minutes do not have to do is say, and board member Larson said this, and then Kelly Devlin said that, and so it's really, that's what we thought it was saying, and so we struck it. They said, no, that's not the intent, so we're asking the board to go back and make that change.
And I believe there's a process, instead of just doing first reading, we can skip to second reading and approve it tonight, since we're just reverting back to the language.
I think that that's fine if other folks are comfortable and feel like we already had discussion on this item past 2 or 3 meetings. Okay, great. All right, is there a motion to approve policy BDDG, this revision?
Move to approve policy BDDG minutes of board meetings.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Quickly, if there are no objections, it was flagged for me that Stephanie and I need to make a little bit of a statement to clarify for the election of board leadership item. So back to item number 3. We both abstained, and it's my understanding that we actually need to give our statement of why. So if we can go ahead. Guess who flagged that for me?
Parliamentary procedure in the back room.
So if there are no objections, we're just going to open that back up. I don't think we need to vote again, but we just want to make sure, but for the record, at least for me, for that item, on my abstention, it was a conflict of interest.
I didn't feel I had, well, yeah, it was a conflict of interest. That's
Great.
That's it.
Can I make a, can I make a
I didn't
comment?
want to vote for myself. There you go.
My understanding is that when you have a conflict of interest, that it's really only in cases where you personally financially benefit. So just for future use.
Wait, we're not getting paid for this?
There you go. So if you're not personally financially benefiting, then you don't have a conflict of interest.
I think that
on
that's the
school board.
formal,
That's my
yeah.
understanding.
I think that that's true, yeah. I think for, yeah, and I think, great, thanks.
I didn't want to vote for myself, is my answer.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to make sure.
You shouldn't feel uncomfortable because there may come a time, and we've had it in the past, where there was a split vote and the actual person who was running broke the tie. So it can happen.
Drama. Okay, well, moving on, now that we put that into the record. Thank you. Constituent, elder. We have the the last. I think we are on the last item. So the I'm sorry it's not bigger, but we will get you a larger copy via email. The last item that we have is a conversation around our board committee, our authorized representatives, and our school liaison. So I made this chart. It's the 2019-2020 committee assignments, authorized representatives, and school liaisons. I had shared with you all that you would have a memo in your packet. You did not and do not yet, so I apologize for the delay on that. I wanted to make sure that I'm getting the right input from our cabinet and legal on some of the technicalities, particularly related to our bond and our other committees. And so as we are working on the final details of that, you will get all of that flushed out in via email. We could have another conversation about it at the next board meeting as well, although I don't necessarily think that's necessary unless you would like. But really, I just wanted to make sure that as we move forward this next year, that you all had a clear understanding of these three assignments. So the committee roles that you are assigned, the authorized representatives and the liaisons, and then the school liaisons. And I'll just briefly talk through what those mean and the general information in the memo that you all will get later. And feel free to kind of jump in, you know, Ken or others on the cabinet on those details. So I'll start with the committee assignments. These were based on strength and skills of the board members, the preferences that you all shared. I had conversations directly with all of you, and really the need and expertise that I felt you all brought to the table in each of those committees. And so we do have, like we've shared before, you know, a couple of new committees this year from the Strategic Planning Committee and the Bond Committee somewhat, although that has been a previous committee in the past. One thing that I wanted to clarify for committees is that the Budget Committee is actually a committee of the whole, so of the whole board, in addition to other community members that you as a board member have a specific appointee dedicated to that committee. And so that's not necessarily one that you get to pick. We're all part of that committee, to clarify. And I write it down here because I do think that as we are planning for a strategic plan for our bond, it's really important to me that we're also kind of thinking about how we are putting our resources towards these goals that we're going to be setting. And so this year, I think, we'll have kind of some conversations with Ken about what that looks like at the board level and how we can engage a little bit more or less, if possible, on that committee. And then I'll just kind of go through these. The Strategic Planning Committee, like in the memo that Pat and Ken shared, is new. I think certainly, we have a lot of goals that we want to make sure we are thinking through based on new funding, but also based on the needs of this district as it is changing, as we see the needs of our facilities, not only to be maintained, but expansion. And so this committee, folks on this one, will really be kind of looking at what would the plan be for the district to set up that process for community engagement, for priority setting, bring that back to the board, for the board to really implement, knowing that there will likely be resources necessary for that process, and then move forward. This committee, in addition to I want to say the bond planning committee also has an expectation of members to be engaged in the recruitment of other committee members. And so some of these committees, for example, the strategic planning and the bond planning, have other members that will need to be part of that conversation. And so it will be up to you all to decide, based on your expertise and your relationships in the schools and the district, who you think needs to be part of those conversations, so that that can be an equitable conversation, similar to, I think, the work that the Racial Equity Committee has been doing thus far. The goal I would like to see for both the strategic planning and the bond planning committee, like I said, is to have kind of this timeline and kind of general priority areas by December, January, back to the board. We'll kind of flesh out exactly when the timeline is based on board meetings, et cetera, but just to give you all a heads up, that's kind of the timeline expected of some of that work. And then the next,
When you're doing the timeline, can you recognize with the bond planning, because it's facilities and programs, that kind of thing, that your strategic plan is going to guide, besides the facility studies, what the committee would come up for on the bond?
Right.
So it kind of, its timeline will follow the strategic
yeah,
plan.
that's a good point. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So I'll make a note of that. And then for the Racial Equity Committee, this one is one that has already been in place. I would say one of the ones that I think has had the most meetings and a really robust engagement process or recruitment process this past year. I don't know if any of the previous board members on that committee want to talk a little bit about their experience there, but I do think that there's a lot of really exciting work being done. One of the things that I've heard about is a racial equity policy that will be coming to the full board by the end of this fiscal year, I believe, and so that will be an expectation that we'll have, that, you know, that I'll look for from the board members participating in that committee, to make sure that that's moving forward, and that, you know, the recommendations of those involved in all of that work this past year or two, or however long it will be, you know, will be discussed at the board level. Is there anything else you wanted to add on that?
I mean, they're pretty close to the policy. I think that one of the things that the policy directs is the creation of a racial equity plan with, you know, kind of outline benchmarks and metrics. And I think that dovetails very nicely into some of the strategic planning that we'll be doing, which is why I'm transitioning out of that one and hopefully into the strategic planning.
You're on that one. Okay, and then the next one is Policy Committee. This is a committee that actually, my understanding, doesn't meet regularly like the other committees, which do have standing meetings, or which will have standing meetings. So it's a little bit of a lighter load depending on how many policies come through for board approval. The goal and intention here is for folks to make sure that you're reviewing policy, you're getting information from legal or other folks necessary before it comes through to the full board for a vote. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions or comments on committee assignments only, and then we'll move through the other areas.
Can I just add one clarification real quick? Just it's kind of interesting because we use the word committee, and the reality of that word means something when it comes to the board. So just to clarify what Andrea was talking about, a number of these truly are committees. And the difference is when we have a committee and it's a board committee, that the agenda must be posted. We must go through the process of minutes, right? All of those things that we should be doing, but just a reality, it falls under the sunshine laws when it's a committee. The other one is board authorized. So those are different things. And one of the board authorized ones is the policy. It's a policy group or policy board authorized. We don't come together for a committee meeting every time a new policy comes up. When policies come up, those policies are shared with those that the board has authorized to do work on policy. They review it, just like Andrea said, we go through with legal, whatever it may be, and then it's brought to the whole board for consideration. So it's not a formal committee. So just as you look at it, there are committees, there are board authorized groupings, and then there's advisories, and the advisories are typically led by the superintendent's office. So it's kind of an interesting delineation, but
I can move that over if it's clear. If it's
however you want
clearer
to do it,
for
I
folks,
just,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So the next column that we have for appointments is the board authorized representatives and the liaisons. And so we have representatives for the ECBC DDEA, which are our teachers, counselors, psychologists, therapists, etc. And then we have OSEA Chapter 40, which are our secretaries, maintenance, custodians, bus drivers, etc. We do have in the current contract for our teachers set to be renegotiated in 2020, so that one will require folks assigned to that, what is it, authorized responsibility, I guess, so to speak, meeting, and we'll give you more information in the memo about kind of length of meetings, et cetera. It can sometimes be a little bit more time commitment given the length of that contract. The OSEA Chapter 40 representatives, that one the contract is currently in place until 2021. So there isn't going to be any active negotiations that we know of. Certainly, there could be an opportunity for folks to engage with labor representatives to learn more about the contract. Well, make sure you have links to the current contract so you can take a look at the information and what's in there and get familiar with some of the items and priorities of the workforce. Some of the other items in this section are the Education Foundation, which I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your experience on that, but it's kind of the fundraising arm of the district, and yeah.
Yeah, so Frida and I are both on that, but she's like the treasurer person of the foundation, so I'm the board liaison to it, and she's just on it.
Oh, as
She's
a
just on
community,
She's just on it. But if anybody else wants to come, you're more than welcome. Let me know. So the Education Foundation generally does some different activities during the year. We have a $5 campaign that Bev will dress up in a funny costume for the back to school for the teachers to try to get them to sign up for the $5 campaign. That creates a fund it takes $5 out of their check every month, or whatever. PEP, is it monthly or? It's once a month. It's once a month. I don't know what your pay cycle is. Once a month. And then teachers can write for special grants to the foundation and say, like we had one that was the Girls on the Run. So they were doing Girls on the Run at Earl Boyles. The teacher running that wanted to buy running shoes that kind of matched for all the girls to do Girls on the Run. So she sent her application in for that. So that kind of thing happens. So teachers ask for funds, special grants and spring grants. And then we also do scholarships to students. So you'll see either at senior night for DDHS or at graduation for Ridge, the foundation will award scholarships. So, and
As well as the $5 claim, half is for the kids, what we call the kids fund, and that's split between the schools based on donations. Free and reduced lunch, it's a complicated formula this nutcase made, this numbers person did, that takes into account free and reduced lunch in schools as well as participation by staff. And it's for things that cannot be funded any other way. Maybe they can't get, a kid really needs glasses and they can't get the funds any other source. They put in a request, and each school has a certain amount that they can use each year and stuff. And we raise good $7,000 every year to go into that every year. But the $5 grant is strictly spent back either for students or staff requests, which usually is helping students. So it all comes right back into the schools.
Great. The next, let's see. Got a better word, I guess. responsibility in this column is the Regional Equity Committee. So this is an outside committee, pretty self-explanatory, based on regional representatives of other East County board members to talk about more inclusive school board experience and ultimately address inequities impacting Portland metro area students and school districts. And so I think this is a really great opportunity, given the work I think that we are doing in our district and really leading the conversation around racial equity here, to then represent David Douglas and all of that good work at this regional conversation. And there are meetings that go, the next meeting is September 10th, and it goes through March 3rd. Those are from 5:30 to 8. Well, actually, and there's a retreat, it looks like, in October, but you'll have all of the dates for those of you who have been assigned to this committee. I think it's a really, really wonderful opportunity to put our heads together and really address some of the larger picture issues that are happening in our area. And then the last and new item, well, I'll stop there if there are any other questions or comments on the authorized representatives and liaisons.
I just wanted comments for those that aren't familiar with the OSCA. Because we just voted in our extension, then it switches to the Employee Relations Council that those members would be attending, and that's a monthly meeting. But it's a good chance to get to know representatives of the classified union.
Yeah, thanks, Frida. So there are two kind of, there's the Employee Relations Council, like Frida said, and then there's also the labor management group, but the Employees Relations Council, I think, again, is a good opportunity for folks just to hear from labor representatives and to start familiarizing yourself with all of their priorities. And then the last column is related to the school liaison appointments. So this is a new thing we're trying for the first time. We've never done this before. Was it your idea, Stephanie's? I can't remember whose.
Ken and I both heard it at different meetings and thought it was a good idea.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, everyone agreed. So our thinking around this, and the goal really is to develop a relationship between board members and school leadership, and really gather information on the priorities, on the needs of those schools, and bring it back to the district or to the board to really get a better sense of what's going on at a little bit more of a micro level. I haven't quite figured out that report back mechanism, if that's something that, we'll choose to have you all share, in the board meetings, if it's something that you want folks to attend at an event with you. We're still kind of working out the kinks there, open to suggestions on what your thinking is around that. But in the meantime, I gave everyone I gave myself 3, but Arthur Academy is, I think, slightly different, I would say. 2 schools, I think that's right, for the school liaison. So, again, this is really just an opportunity for you to engage with that school. I think Ken and I also talked about, having him connect you with leadership. So if you don't know the principals, that's fine. He'll, make sure that you get that information so that you can move forward. And it can, engagement is really broad. So it can look anything, from visiting that school to meeting with the principal to going to the conferences. So if you already have kids in those schools, and you can already check that off. Or any international nights, and we're going to try this out, but really open to feedback and seeing how that works, and yeah. So those are the assignments for this year. And like I said, one more time, so we are kind of working through all of the final details of the memo that really outlines, I think, more thoroughly the expectations, responsibilities, and kind of the timeline for some of the outcomes for these, particularly the committees. And as soon as we have that outlined, we'll be sure to get that your way, but definitely let me know, me and Stephanie and Ken, if you have any other questions in the meantime.
Go ahead.
I think I should comment that most of these only have 2 people on the committee, and we can have up to 3, no more than 3, because we don't want a quorum. So if you, especially new board members, if you see something you think you might be interested in, there's only 1 or 2 people on the committee, talk to Andrea about adding you to it, because the more you learn, the better. So.
just had a question in terms for the school liaison, as to what would be communicated to the schools. Is this a role where, like, if the school has a particular concern that they feel like they want brought to the board, that they contact their liaison? Is that what they would be told, or is it less formal than that with them?
I hadn't thought about that before. I think ideally, if the liaison is engaged with the school, it should be hopefully easier for them to contact a liaison. That doesn't necessarily mean, in my head, that it precludes them from contacting others if they already have relationships with others on the board. I think the intention here is to really make it a clear, defined line of communication.
I would just say that, you know, we have to be careful about kind of lines of, you know, there's a hierarchy, right? And so I wouldn't say that like we're board members here to troubleshoot staff issues or something like that. Like if people have a concern, it really does need to be brought to their, you know, the cabinet, you know, the leader of the school, if it's a principal. But I think being another set of ears on the ground, that we can work as a team. I mean, sometimes that might happen, but I would think it's more about like going in and understanding kind of what are the concerns and struggles maybe that they're having, being able to bring that back and share it, some successes and joys that are happening there. There's so much that goes on in the schools that we miss, right, if we're not there. And so this just, I guess, kind of gives an opportunity for board members to learn, to share, and to feel some ownership, right, over what happens in the schools. That's my understanding, right?
Yeah, that's perfect, Stephanie. I so appreciate you saying that, and I would just echo that. I think the first intention really is relationship building, right? That connection about what is our mission, what are we doing, and so the intention isn't really the first intention, isn't that? But that's always a conduit. I think anytime, it's just like if you're in the store and a parent sees you as a board member, they might come to you with a concern, and of course you're going to listen. But the next step of that is connecting with board chair, board leadership, or my office to how do we process that out, right? Does that make sense? So I think what's going to be communicated as the first step is making sure the invitation, the connection, and what does that look like? What does that relationship look like? It could be, as described, could be we have a band concert. Can you come to that concert this evening? And I think I'm going to ask that any time that board liaisons are there, that you get introduced and recognized so the people in the community recognize who you are as well, because they might come up and high five or say, did you know, or can you help me with? So that's one, and or it could be, do you want to come have coffee or come connect with the principal or the leadership team or staff or our lead custodian or whatever. I see it first and foremost, that relationship building, but part of that does come with addressing questions, issues, celebrations. So, okay.
I think we were also, because we were trying to stress family engagement and community engagement, this is the way as board members we can be out in our school communities and not put too much burden on all the board members, especially when you're working, but maybe a couple times a year is attending events that they're having and just having your presence there, you know, and socializing with the parents and whatnot. It's just another way of connecting. Is at least that's how the other districts are using it, as a way to connect with their board.
Madam Chair, do you mind if I piggyback and just talk a little bit about advisories? So what we talked about, again, board authorized. We talk about committees and kind of delineation. There's a third that are kind of ad hoc as needed, and they're advisories. They're called superintendent advisories. Usually I call those, ask for volunteers and ask for people that are interested. Many of these are not ongoing, and we've done it two ways. We've done it before where we've gotten people on the list, signed up, and if it was called, then we know who to go to, or we've kind of waited, and if there's something that comes up, then we do an all call out. I need some board members who's interested and go through. At this point, I'm just going to share a few, but there are a couple that will be happening this year. So I'll follow up again with an email communication and go from there. But one is we do have a banking and advisory ad hoc. Again, in the past, hasn't been needed often, but there could be times where we have that. Charter school, again, is ad hoc, and really that just comes down if we have a charter school application come in, then there's a very thorough process we go through to review that, and we typically have board members on that team with us to review that. Facilities, construction, and probably the more active one is real estate. So having someone on that, and that will be something that we'll be looking at this year and need someone involved in. So right now, not active. We've used the board chair and vice chair, and we can continue to do that. But if not, we can talk about who might serve on that. We also have what's called the Quality Education Council. That's required by contract in the license contract. If there's specific changes to the contract outside of bargaining and it is not outside, it's inside, but a different track for bargaining and or the evaluation process, we call that together. We haven't called that in many years. So I don't see it happening in the next year, this year, but again, it does sit there. And the last one that will be, again, called this year is administrative salary. It's much like the license negotiations or bargaining. This year is the end of their agreement. So at the end of this year, they'll be coming to the table. Can we discuss our compensation? It's not a contract, it's a memorandum of understanding with administrators, but that will be as well. And again, I'll follow up with an email on that and communicate all the explanations and kind of communicate where we need some people, and you can communicate interest. Is that okay?
Okay, that'll be an ongoing conversation. That is the last item that we have, so there's nothing else. Oh, thank you, you're right. So let's see, we have a memo, other business approval of purchase of buses from Western Bus Sales. Pat?
Yes. So we're requesting approval not to exceed $223,000 to purchase 2 buses, a small bus, large bus. You're going to notice I didn't give you specific amounts because we're buying it on cooperative, and it's kind of like going to the buffet. You can kind of select things. So right now, the small bus, as we've got it priced, is about $82,000, and the large bus is about $135,000. We're looking. And we're going to a conventional bus.
I
so
know,
that
that's
means
why
it
I
has
said
a nose.
135 for a conventional bus.
For a conventional bus. So as you recall, we had a couple instances last year. We had 2 buses get totaled.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll be replacing those. I will be dipping into the funds that I put in the insurance fund as payment from our insurance, which is nowhere near that amount, unfortunately. So we are requesting approval, but we kind of put the price there because we're still kind of looking at a couple things that we may want to add to the buses, but we do not want to go above the amount that we've budgeted. So
I move approval.
Second.
Discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, moved.
Before you. So I just asked Andrea if I could have 20 seconds before we adjourn, because I know she's getting ready, and Kyle, she did it pretty quickly, I'm just telling you. But I jumped into my superintendent's report, and I really wanted to slow down, and sometimes, well, I didn't, and I apologize. But I just wanted to recognize and thank, we had 4 members sworn in this evening, 2 that are coming back, so thank you 2 specifically, I really appreciate it. But we have 2 brand new individuals that were sworn in, and obviously we celebrated. But from the district, I get the privilege to say thank you. Thank you for your willingness to step up, to serve our community, to represent. It means a lot. It's a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy. Also, I think very rewarding, right? When we get the opportunity to connect with kids and be in schools, there's nothing more rewarding. But I truly want to recognize the 2 individuals that said yes and took the calling and are here, because it means a lot, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you very much, and I apologize I didn't do it earlier, and you made it through your first meeting. So thank you.
All right, so with that, we are adjourned at 8:09.
Woohoo!